Fair Lending Coalition. This is our 32nd year of doing fair lending forums, and today is a kind of on-the-ground practical forum where we're looking at the issue of newly elected council people in the city of Cleveland. And there's nothing more important that connects government to its leadership than a council person, because the council person is who you usually call to get an answer when you have problems. And we have Dean England from the College of Urban Affairs, Levin College of Urban Affairs, who is our moderator, and our council people. And look forward to a good discussion. And if you have a question or a comment, either one, just put it in the chat and make sure that people get their questions or their comments responded to during the forum. I also want to thank the members of the planning committee and all of our conference sponsors, some of whom I actually are on the phone. Thank you so much for joining us today, and look forward to your participation. Dean, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Bromley. As Mr. Bromley said, my name is Roland Anglin. I'm the Dean of the College of Urban Affairs at Cleveland State, and I'm very pleased to be a part of this lunch brown bag forum. We have a number of council people here today. I'm very excited to hear what they have to say. We have Deborah Gray of Ward 4, Richard Starr of Ward 5, Stephanie House of Ward 7, and Chris Harsh of Ward 13. I'm going to start out by asking a question that is on a lot of people's minds, I think. How did you get into public service? How does one end up being a council person in the city of Cleveland? Let's start with Councilperson Gray.
Dean, I believe we are still waiting for Councilwoman Gray to join us.
Why don't we go to Councilperson Stephanie House?
Well, good morning. Well, I want to first thank everyone for inviting us to join you this morning. When I think about how I got here, I always, share with people that I grew up in a very civic-minded home. My mom was the president of our street block club. Shout out to the street block club folks. And she was also a precinct committee person. So that's a person who is really elected to help their neighbors understand politics. And so literally from the time I can remember, like 6 years old, like me and my cousins every summer were in parades, were helping somebody pass off some literature. And it really intrigued me that this was a place where people could help people, right? And so that really set me on my journey, being in school, being on student council. I was in student government in college, and I was hooked, right? And while public service, I knew it was going to be a part of my life. It's not all of it, right? So I've done a couple of other things: engineering, education, entrepreneurship. And I found my way being here. When it comes to Cleveland City Council, I definitely, it took me some turns to get here, some hiccups along the way. But I'm very grateful that the residents in Ward 7, selected me to represent them here and now, and really looking forward to the partnerships that I can have, within City Hall and without, to really work to improve the quality of life for community members here. So that's the short version.
Thank you, Councilperson House. Why don't we go to Councilperson Chris Harsh? How did you get into public service?
Sure. So thanks also for inviting me today. So I'm either a college dropout or a college reject, depending on how you look at it. But after my post-secondary plans fell through, I moved to Cleveland in the 90s with a whole lot of fire in my belly, and I got involved with a bunch of activist organizations. I worked with a group called Food Not Bombs that prepared and shared food with the homeless community on Public Square. I did that for 5 years. I came across a group of people that were trying to get a new trial for Mumia Abu Jamal, who was a convicted cop killer in Philadelphia. And I learned a lot about the intersection of race and crime and justice from focusing on that and learning about that trial. I spent a lot of time protesting war and militarism, and got disillusioned with activism after the world's largest protest to prevent the invasion of Iraq fell flat and failed. So I ended up kind of wandering into community organizing after activism didn't really get me where I wanted to go. And at the ripe old age of 27, somebody taught me power analysis, which was a very good thing to learn. And so I started organizing with Acorn for 5 years in communities, mostly in Cleveland, but across the country, really, where I stopped talking and started listening. And I started listening to thousands of people tell me what was going on in their neighborhoods. And I learned from people in this city what's going on from the perspective of, you know, the tens of thousands of people that live here. After Acorn went out of business, I continued organizing with the American Federation of Teachers, with the East Side Organizing Project, or ESOP, and then on a few political campaigns. Most notably, I worked on Dan Brady's first campaign for county council, which sort of got me to rethink the way I looked at politics. I sort of stayed close to political organizing as my wife and I started our family, but I got a day job at a local community development corporation, Metro West, and I was there for 7 years, and I focused on housing issues primarily in the Stockyards and Clark Fulton neighborhoods. I ended up getting a state license in lead risk assessment and got up to speed on all the lead issues, and then got licensed in real estate and learned about transfers and appraisals, which I hope we talk about later, and all the ins and outs of the real estate market. I walked into my Democratic Ward Club one day because I heard that the president of City Council was my new councilman. I just bought my house in Old Brooklyn, and I thought it was interesting that the president of City Council made himself available once a month to me and the 5 people that showed up. It was like we had a private audience with the second most powerful person in Cleveland, because it was the Democratic Ward Club and people just weren't interested in being involved. So I got to know then Council President Kelly for a couple of years. And when he announced that he wasn't going to be running for the seat, he was going to run for mayor instead, I threw my hat in the ring for the city council seat, figuring I had little to lose. And was fortunate enough to get a healthy share of the vote. I did door knock 7,800 houses and talked to about 3,600 of my neighbors in the process. So I learned what I used what I learned from community organizing, how to beat the pavement and find out what's on people's minds, and that's how I shaped my campaign, and have been using those issues that I picked up from the people in my community as my guiding star since. So activism, organizing, and led to politics, and here we are.
Thank you, Councilperson. Why don't we go to Councilperson Richard Starr? Tell us your story, your journey to public service.
Oh, wow. First, I would like to say thank you for giving me the opportunity, as well as my colleagues, the opportunity to be here with you all to just discuss some different things that are going on with us, as well as our upbringing. Well, my story is different. I did not grow up having any desire to be in politics. What I would say is throughout the work that I've done throughout my life, I've always found myself being a servant. So growing up in the central neighborhood, lifelong resident in Ward 5, growing up in King County Estates, I've seen all of the struggles that we've had to deal with as residents. And as I grew up, I always performed well, whether it was in sports, recreation, service. So therefore, I end up stumbling upon a couple different residents through my work at Boys and Girls Club who reached out to me and suggested I get involved in politics, which started right around in 2016. And I started doing some organizing, some community meetings. And then next you know, I was on the ballot for election in 2017. Wasn't successful in that run, but I learned a lot of great deal of knowledge and valuable lessons for me to be prepared for when I decided to run last year in 2021. So in a nutshell, I would just basically say the work that I've done as far as working with youth for the last 14 and a half years, learning that some of the issues that that hurt our neighborhoods or hurt our youth, it stems from the neighborhood and environment. So that led me to say, hey, I want to do more than just help our youth. I want to really help them families. So therefore, I got more involved into the civic engagement component in our neighborhoods in Ward 5. And the residents convinced me, like, hey, whether it was from tags, messages, pop-ups, hey, you should run for office, you should run for office. And that encouraged me to run in 2017. But then 2017 loss compelled me to get more involved in my own studies and went back to school in order for me to secure 2 degrees, my master's in business administration from Barton Wallace, which then took me into the point that I said I was going to run in 2021. If the residents wanted someone to run and wanted me to run, I'd do whatever the residents asked me to do.
Thank you, Councilperson Starr. Great story. Well, for the panel, and we're going to start with Councilperson House again. Now that you've been in office for 3 months, what has the experience been like, and what surprised you the most?
So interesting. So I've been in Cleveland City Council for 3 months. I was in the state legislature for 7 years prior to joining Cleveland City Council. So I'm not new to public service. It's just amazing how different the differences from the State House to Cleveland City Council they're very different. You know, I'm going from a place now where I was in a very partisan environment to technically a nonpartisan environment. I was in the super minority to being in the majority technically, you know, so rules and processes are different. Like all of us actually can't meet together, which is very different. And I'm still trying to like navigate that process. You know, now actually being in a place now where I have more of a opportunity to kind of partner and have a team to kind of carry out many of the things as we've established our vision and goals for Ward 7. The accessibility to people, you know, as I was traveling back and forth, you know, from Cleveland to Columbus, and now being home for the majority of my time, I'm definitely much more connected to residents and other community stakeholders. I think I'm still like learning processes though. That's the one thing I think is probably surprising of just how much I still have to learn about the operation of City Hall. And again, you make assumptions that, oh, you've been elected, you know, but I am very, very new to this environment and still really working daily to understand processes and really working to see how, you know, offering my opinions and suggestions of how we can do it better and meet the needs to our very broad and diverse community here in the city of Cleveland. So those are a couple of the things that kind of stick out to me.
Thank
And
you.
I'm gonna tell y'all, I'm real sad about my office. Like I didn't even think I missed my office, but it's kind of nice, you know, having a view. And now you know, that's my first world problem of my office, but we're gonna work it out.
Okay, I'm sure that you will, Councilperson. Councilperson Harsh, what about you? What's your experience been like after 3 months, and what surprised you the most?
What the most?
Surprised you most?
Surprised you the most? I'm gonna just be as honest as I possibly can. I remember the day I first cleared $50,000 a year as a salary. I was so proud of myself. I don't come from money, and I've never had this much of it. And honestly, it is throwing me off because like I'm living in a state of comfort right now that I never thought I would achieve. And I can see how this can impact a lot of people in city council because Cleveland's not known for our wealthy neighborhoods. It took me a minute to get, I mean, I'm better paid than I ever thought I would be in life. And so that's really personally hit me the hardest. It's just, it wasn't something I really thought about. It's certainly not why I ran. but it is an odd feeling to know what it's like to go to bed comfortable and not worry about next month. And that's the first time that I've had that feeling as a professional adult. In the job itself, which is probably what you were asking about, I'm surprised there's not more proactive organization around the issues that are coming down the line. We've got our committees, we've got our chairs, we've got legislation, we talk about it, but I feel like we really get picked off by the interest groups that sort of target us one by one. And I don't really, maybe I need to be more proactive in my job about this, but I need more time to spend to figure out what's on my colleagues' minds than I currently have. So I need to spend more than just committee time. But I realize that if I'm in a room with more than like 3 of us, I could be breaking sunshine laws, right? So like, I really want to know what more of my colleagues think about the different issues that are coming our way, because I'm really curious how they're going to feel when these things come up in committee. But I feel like sometimes we get down to the committee room and that's the first conversation we're having and they expect us to vote. And it's like, I haven't even had a chance to talk to my colleagues about these issues, but here we are, we're going to vote. And the only background I've had on some of these issues is a couple of groups that have met with me on their own. So I was kind of surprised that there isn't more organized, proactive approach to the legislation. On the neighborhood side, it's exactly what I expected. It's potholes, it's snow plows, it's the abandoned house, it's the loud house, it's, the speeding and all that. And that part's totally cool with me. I'm good with that. That's totally expected. But I'm surprised that, on the legislative side, there isn't, more of an infrastructure to prepare for the issues coming our way.
Thank you, Councilperson. Councilperson Richard Starr, how about you? After 3 months, what has your experience been, and what has surprised you the most?
Wow. After these we've been in office 114 days, even though nobody's counting. But I think the most interesting thing for me is just figuring out the systems that's in place. What I recall is once we were sworn into office, we went into a retreat to learn the surface level from each of the departments, which was helpful. But then the next day the next week rather, you were in office, meaning residents were calling about issues and we had to really navigate ourselves to figure out how to get things done. So the best practice I was able to do is connect with some other colleagues and council members who are very much familiar to each department just to get some support. So I think that was pretty good for me. Also, which has just been difficult for me is just understanding how big of a role that our executive assistants play as far as working with council members and trying to get an understanding of why we only have one staff person that working with the council member as opposed to more staff on hand that can help within a department. Because as I call it, when you're a member of city council in Cleveland, the way we are set up, everything that people or residents may have concerns with, they're going to call your office, even if it's just some city services issues in which you try to handle those situations case by case, but giving the civic engagement and educating residents that, hey, most of these issues stem from stuff that goes on through the mayor, who's responsible for city service, public works, and things like that. So being able to create that balance in which it's not just all of us, but it's more so a partnership and working with the administration to get things done, which has been something that a challenge, but not a bad challenge, but more so understanding who are the direct person. You may reach out to a director, but there may be a commissioner or a manager who can really get it done quicker than the director can get the information to them. So just learning those best practices has been, not so much of a big challenge, but more so just working it out, learning, and to be able to remember it so you can become on cue with everything that comes to your way as far as that. But other than that, I think these last 114 days has been great, learning that different colleagues in different neighborhoods have different issues, but then some neighborhoods have similar issues, and how we as members of council can work together to get things done has been very important. I will give kudos to Councilwoman House, who does a lot of checks and balances on and off the record with us, but just to make sure we're all on moving along with getting things done is something that I I commend my colleagues as well as myself by not just being, singled out our own communities, but focus on us together as a council have to represent the entire city of Cleveland.
Thank you, Councilperson. Let's go back to Councilperson House. What have you identified?
Hold on.
Just really quick, I just wanted to inform you, Councilmember Gray has joined us at this point. So,
Okay, welcome, Councilperson Gray.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Well, we'll get you into this queue of questions. Let's start with Councilperson House. What have you identified as your top 3 priorities in office?
So my top 3 priorities here in Cleveland City Council, number one, I am, I operate from a place, seek to understand. So my number 1 priority this year is really taking a moment to really understand this. Like, I'm really trying to identify, all the businesses and organizations that are serving in Ward 7, as well as getting to know the residents and those who have been working probably by themselves, right? Which goes into my second goal, which is really focusing on developing a more comprehensive communication strategy. With the amount of information that is coming to us, I will say I don't have the best system in place to communicate to people, communicate what they want to hear, and keep people informed. Even though, I do a lot of community meetings and office hours, that usually is never enough time to share all of the things that are happening. And so I really am prioritizing communicating information, quality information, to the residents of Ward 7, because a lot of times, as I've heard feedback, a lot of people feel like they are in the dark and they don't know what's going on, and they don't, they just don't know how to be connected. And I see that as a real fundamental thing that we need to do. And thirdly, I really have just a priority, and this really is a threefold, which is kind of focusing on my vision, which is the ABCs of access to resources, building family and neighbor relationships, and creating safe and vibrant neighborhoods. So, and we're doing that in a variety of different ways, but, you cannot get to that place of a vision without understanding what's been happening and really communicating people so that you can inspire and get more people to participate in a lot of the work that we need to get done.
Great, thank you. Councilperson Harsh, what about you? What have you identified as your top 3 priorities in office?
Yes, thanks. So my top 3 priorities are to help the people that live here, to grow the city, and to prepare the city. So I believe in code enforcement, and I did my first 600 houses a couple of weeks ago. And as a result, I'm sending out brochures and flyers on housing resources to dozens and dozens of homeowners. I want to help people live here take advantage of the resources that we have available to us. Cleveland, in my estimate, has a 2-pronged problem. We have a population that's largely lower income and needs a lot of support. And we have a city that's declining in population, and we need to reverse that trend. So we have to simultaneously help the people that live here thrive and grow and build our communities, while being attractive to new people that we desperately need to move into the city so that we can grow our population and stop this negative population trend. So working with the people in my neighborhood to help them maintain their homes and maintain the values of the community is my number 1. Growing the city is my number 2. And I think there's 2 ways to think about growing the city. One is job creation, and the other is school development. I just know from decades of listening that people used to run for the border when their kids came of school age. And the first thing they tried to do was beat a path to Lakewood or Parma or Shaker Heights or Euclid or Garfield or somewhere not named Cleveland Public Schools. So my kids are in CMSD, and I'm working with our local schools, and I'm trying to focus on ways to support the tremendous success that CMSD has had in the last couple of years in their restructuring, but also to promote them, because there are really good school options in Cleveland. And I think that that's a really essential thing for the city to work on if we're going to attract homeowners and people raising families in the city. So that's the second one. The third one is to really wrap my head around the budget. I sat in budget hearings this January longer than anyone else on council. I only missed a total of 4 hours of the 100 hours of budget hearings. And I sat there at the far end of the table, taking a lot of notes, because making sure that the 2023 budget is a lot more intentional than this year's budget is a very, very important thing for this city. With a new mayor, it was, there was a lot of like, let's give it a shot. This department wants these 5 new people. That department wants 7 new people. We're going to try to like hire up, and I think it's a good year to try that. But making sure that we are running a financially tight ship. One thing Frank Jackson will never be accused of is mismanaging the city's finances. He did a fantastic job for 16 years of making sure that the city stayed afloat and didn't go underwater. And I think it's really important that we retain that financial responsibility. Cleveland's never had a loss of services in the last 16 years because we're good stewards. And I want to make sure that we're staying on top of that. So help people live here, grow the city for the future, and get ready for a robust budget discussion next year.
Thank you, Councilperson Harsh. Now let's go to Councilperson Deborah Gray. Same question for you. What have you identified as your top 3 priorities in office?
Well, it's more than top 3. That is a great question, but it's definitely more than a top 3. I can let you know the top 3 that I have many calls on, but I have more than the top 3 in Ward 4 per se. But the number 1 is housing. That is the number 1, sustainability, to live in a comfortable, beautiful environment. And that is a topic, subject that I deal with every day, all day, with tenants all over Ward 4. And that's a priority of mine, to try to do my best to resolve their issues within, hopefully within 48 hours, because you got to go through the steps of finding out who to contact. And then once you contact that person, how you going to resolve the issue with that person, the landlord or the management company, to help the tenant to be more comfortable in the situation that the management of the landlord got them in. And secondly, my second priority is basically safety in my community, because of the gun violence and the killing and the robbery and just a lot of things that the community is uncomfortable with all the way around, in their lifestyles. So, and then the safety, I have to deal with a commander in my 4th district to see how we can at least address it, to understand how to make people comfortable and to bring people to the table to understand how we need to help our community to understand that we're here for them. Because that's a milestone in itself. You can never get rid of crime, but you can try to reduce it and try to understand how to maintain it in a sense where people can understand to, where to go get help when they feel they have to show some violent actions. And the third one that I'm dealing with is just, it's so hard to say 1, 2, 3, because I'm 1, 2, 3, because I deal with so much of it. And just the third one is just people just want to understand what's going on with the system altogether. They don't know who to call, they don't know who to talk to, they don't know what answer that they can get that can help them in that situation. So all in all, right there in itself, you have to sort and understand the needs of your constituents to understand how to help them as in a whole. So right now, that's what that's what I deal with right now.
Thank you, Councilperson. And I understand that it's so much and you can only tackle one thing at a time. This is the sponsored by the Ohio Fair Lending Coalition. And so I would be remiss if I didn't move to a housing question for our panel. So Councilperson House, tell us about the issue of housing and how it relates to your community, your ward. What are the challenges?
Oh, and Councilman Starr, you know what, I'm going to defer to, well, I'm not going to defer. Would you mind now? I'm going to have Councilman Starr chime in and then I'll go after him.
Okay.
Councilman Starr?
On the ask, do you want to hear about my priorities?
Oh, I didn't. I thought we got you.
I just want to make sure, Doc. You know, we go way back now.
Go ahead, Councilperson Starr. Deal with the priorities or deal with housing. Sorry about that.
He definitely wants to talk about his priorities. Go ahead, Councilman Starr.
You tied tongue.
You're on mute, Councilman Starr.
There you go. Okay, I'm sorry. So some of the top priorities that I will list or been working on since these last 114 days was just bringing the equilibrium standards up plan for our neighborhood in Ward 5. Like, we are behind the threshold on a lot of things, but I hear equal and equality throughout my time in office, and I've been like, if you don't have the same opportunities as other neighborhoods. So we have to bring the standards of living in Ward 5 up to the same code, creating the opportunities for a safer neighborhood where people can work in the neighborhood and have a good paying job, work on addressing this food desert issue that is in the neighborhood, as well as making sure to provide more additional social services to our community. One thing that I always speak of, the fact that Ward 5 medium income is $15,000, but then in the central neighborhood in a particular area, the medium income is $10,000, which is alarming because it shows that residents are either working part-time jobs or they're not working at all. So figuring out a solution and bringing services or support to those areas will help, but then also establishing a home repair support. One thing that I say about my community in Ward 5, we have 19 different precincts. 10 of those are in public housing. And then on the outskirts, you have different homeowners living in different business. So making sure those homeowners do not get forgotten when we're trying to address the needs in the neighborhoods, such as in the public housing precinct. So working to make sure we have a program in place that will help homeowners fix their houses without asking for them to give their whole life savings and reports of every thing they have in their bank account, making sure the best practices and the process is more smoothly and it doesn't push them away because some of the information they may just physically don't have. So I am big on grassroots, working with residents, learning from residents and including them in decisions making. So therefore I can always attest that I'm doing the work that residents are asking me to do.
Thank you, sir. So let's get back on track.
I'm jumping in, Dean Anglin, about the housing question.
Yes, thank you, Councilperson.
I will say, when it comes to the housing priority, I really see this as one of the fundamental issues that we must address in the city of Cleveland. If you don't have an affordable, quality place to live, many of the safety challenges we are dealing with are due to the fact that people are just in a state of crisis and a state of vulnerability. And so what I would like for us, the city of Cleveland in particularly, to work on is developing a real system that we can ensure that housing affordability is an actual reality based on the economics of the city of Cleveland. If we know right now that the average house income in the city of Cleveland. I think that it's up to like 30,000. I'm so used to mine, which is a little under 20,000. But even in Councilman Starr's case, where there is household incomes of $10,000 to $15,000, we as a city should be more proactive in ensuring that we can connect our residents to housing options based on that. And they should be quality, right? And it also should be compared for those to repair your home, maintain your home. Right now, people in the city of Cleveland are paying exorbitant amounts of money to live in places that you wouldn't even want your worst enemy to live in. You know, and I think that's maybe even something I'm doing a public brainstorm now. I think, you know, we and collectively, those of us in Cleveland City Council should just start doing go through the places that are for rent and just go start looking at them and see what people are charging. I mean, I will couple this to what Councilman Harsh has indicated about code enforcement. It is criminal what we have allowed people, companies, whoever you are, to enrich themselves at the expense of our people, and they are living in squalor. So I have very strong opinions when we come to housing here in the city of Cleveland, but it has to be centered around ensuring that people have access to affordable, quality housing here in the city of Cleveland, and based on and having a housing portfolio based on the variety of incomes that we have.
Thank you, Councilperson. And why don't we move to Councilperson Harsh? What are your thoughts on the housing challenge in your ward?
Yeah, so I will echo everything the Councilwoman House just said. She's absolutely 100% correct. And I'll just sort of build off of that and keep going. So there's an obvious housing shortage in America right now across the country. And here in Cleveland, we tore down 8,000 houses between 2008 and 2012. It was our cleanup from the foreclosure crisis, right? We had to do it. They were sitting around vacant, they were dangerous, they were nuisance, but we didn't replace them with 8,000 new affordable units. In fact, what we've been building in the city of Cleveland, because of market reasons that are really beyond our control, is not affordable housing. It's middle and upper income housing. The cheapest thing you can build, stick built, as we say, in the city of Cleveland right now is about $240,000 turnkey, and that is not affordable for the people in our neighborhoods. I will kick and scream to my grave, arguing against the collective wisdom of housing advocates who say that you should take your annual salary, triple it, and that's what you can afford. If you're making $40,000 a year, I do not recommend buying a $120,000 house. I would recommend an $80,000 house. That would be a very, very sound financial investment if you're making $40,000. But we don't have a lot of $80,000 houses for sale that are in good shape in our neighborhoods, and so we need to figure out how to make our neighborhoods available to people that need this housing, because we can't build new affordable housing. We can't build the new product. There are a couple of organizations. Habitat for Humanity does a great job. They put out a wonderful product. CHN Housing Partners do the lease purchase program, which builds a quality product that gets into some of those. But those are very niche projects that are entirely subsidized, and that's why they become affordable. So we have to figure out how to use the resources we have. Now, we're about to have a big conversation around tax abatements in the city, and we're going to rethink our use of tax abatements. I am going to be going to bat over and over and over again for tax abatements for affordable housing. So if you can put something on the market that falls into an affordability range for working people, I would like to see that house get the abatement. Right now in America, we could, in Cleveland, build an $85,000 1,100 square foot unit with 2 bathrooms and 3 bedrooms. We could put it on a standard lot in Cleveland that's 40 by 120. We could have a driveway and a garage and all those things. And with a tax abatement, we could put this in the hands of a first-time home buyer for $400 a month, taxes and insurance included. But we don't do that. And we don't do that because we've chosen not to do that. We have not used our tools to incentivize the construction of affordable housing. We've used it to spur markets. We've used it to create markets. And I'm not saying that was a bad thing. You know, 20 years ago when I got to Cleveland, there were like no rich people here, right? We didn't have what Chicago has, or New York or Philadelphia, where they have wealthy neighborhoods, where they have people that make high incomes paying their taxes to their cities. We just didn't have a wealthy neighborhood. So if I lived in Tremont from 02 to 09, and if we had to sacrifice Tremont to the wealthy, I'm okay with it. Most of the people that live there for generations had moved out a long time ago anyway. It's a small neighborhood, but we had to figure out how to make the rest of Cleveland available to working people. And that's where we had to look at our tools through abatements and through different incentive programs to make sure that what we're putting on the market is available to people to live here. But what we could really do is figure out how to bring some good jobs. I know jobs are easy to find right now. Everybody's hiring. They're all hiring $15 an hour. And I know that's only a temporary thing, but I'm looking for those big employers that come in and hire people by the thousands. I'm looking for, who can take a spot down there in the valley and build something where we can put, 4,000 people a shift to work. As someone said, there's nothing wrong with Cleveland that 50,000 jobs won't solve. And I would love to figure out how to get that type of growth back in the city, because I think a lot of other problems would fall by the wayside if we could get people back to work in really good paying jobs again. But I'll stop.
Thank you, Councilperson. Now, why don't we go to Councilperson Richard Starr? What are some of the housing challenges that you're seeing in your neck of the woods?
Just like some of the things my colleagues both just mentioned, there's a gap in between home ownership. And which I mean by that is you encourage residents and young people to go to school and get educated so they can move up in life and advance and make some middle class earning. But once they start making that good earning, there's no housing for them. Everything is either, sometimes it's low income housing, or then you have a part of your neighborhood where you don't have enough money to live there. Like I've seen developers come in and the housing market place properties in the city of Cleveland that is like $400,000 or $500,000 homes. When I'm like, that is not a reflection of the neighborhood, but we also need to protect those individuals who are residents who have interest in living in the city of Cleveland to have a chance and opportunity to purchase a home well within the range, even if it's at market rate or below. But we need to make sure it's done strategically correct without just outcasting or gentrification happening in our neighborhood. So I think it's big for us as a council to work together to correct these issues and problems, but figuring out ways that policies and writing legislation can better help support. Prime example, I have some development going on in CMHA public housing estates. And I spoke this past weekend to some residents during our neighborhood cleanup, and a resident told me that they received this information for them to find different housing because of the new development or the rehab that's going on in their current housing, in which they have two options. One, you can move to another estate, or two, you could set that a Section 8 voucher. And the resident told me the problem that they have with the Section 8 voucher is a lot of landlords is not accepting that. So if you get that voucher, it may cause a problem for them, or they may move to another estates in which they're trying to say, hey, we're trying to advance. So there's so many different issues that are plaguing us from having fair housing that we just have to roll up our sleeves, come up with a plan, and work to get these things addressed.
Indeed. Thank you, Councilperson. Why don't we go to Councilperson Deborah Gray and ask her about housing and the challenges that she's seeing in her ward.
All right, well, the housing and challenges that I see in Ward 4 is because of the out-of-state owners that own the properties, and that's dealing with LLCs. You can't locate these out-of-state owners because they're under shell names, and you don't know where they live. So due to that, the tenants that live in apartment sites, they are having it bad because they can't reach the management company properly to get the assistance that they need, because the management claims that the management claims that they need to wait for the owner to get the information they need, to serve the tenants. So the tenants are now living in a deplorable situation, per se. And I'm put it out there as Van Aken, South and North Moreland, and Shaker Boulevard, and that's around Shaker Square. I have never had this much interaction with tenants in that area that's living in deplorable apartments around Shaker Square in Ward 4, but also the tenants that live in Woodland, Mount Pleasant, and a Buckeye. They deal with slum landlords that is not taking care of their properties. So that's a major problem that's happening all around Ward 4, because I echo all my other council people, and we need to understand, where we need to go to get help for our tenants, but there's no place that you can go to get help for tenants that's living in these deplorable situations if the city is not helping us to help them, dealing with, providing them with better grants, better funding. And if we don't have more maximum funding to help the tenants in that situation, how can we do our job properly? And for me, I have certain, I learned certain ways to help the tenants. I know certain type of grants that I can help the tenants to reach out for repair, for their homes. I can connect them with other resources so they can get a better housing. They can get, they're able to move around a little bit, but they're moving around into another, deplorable situation. So to manage this whole housing situation, there's no answer for that, because every place that you go, there's a problem everywhere. So it's just, it's frustrating. It's very frustrating when you can't come up with a definite answer to save everybody until we get a handle on these terrible landlords that's hiding away under these shell companies, and then the management company have to deal with them and can't deal with the tenants. How can we really get out here and maintain our constituents to live a very healthful, sustainable lifestyle? Like this morning, I had a young lady who had been calling me for the last 3 weeks that live on Shaker Boulevard. Okay, live on Shaker Boulevard. So she called me this morning. She called me at least 3 times a week, and she tells me how frustrated she is. But she finally got some traction because she called her attorney and forced the management company to give her a better rate on her rent. They want to go up $100 on her rent, and she living in deplorable conditions. So now she learned how to negotiate. I would take you to court or put my money in escrow unless you reduce this extra $100 that I can't pay, as well as councilwoman and all the other council women that we were on our Zoom meeting last week about equal pay for women. So she managed to communicate not only with me, with her attorney, and with legal aid. And she heard us house that she need to be forceful. And she learned that just by listening. And she called me this morning and said, Councilwoman Gray, I won. They reducing the $100 because I refused to pay them. And they negotiated a lesser amount on her, raising her rent for her to stay. So she told me that. And so she said, when that's all done and said, she's going to, I told her to call the health department. I told her to call, the health department. I told her to call the director of housing and building, Miss Martin, so she can stay connected with people living in deplorable situations. So why should she have to negotiate to live better and not to pay a higher rent? So I'm gonna say this, what is the right answer for us to get out here to do our council jobs to help everyone that we can when, when this has been going on for years? And why has this been going on? I don't even have that answer, but it's a doggone fight that we have to fight in order to save our communities so they can live in a sustainable, healthy environment.
Thank you, Councilperson Gray. I see that Councilperson Harsh has his hand up. Why don't we get you in here before we turn to the audience for questions?
Yeah, I just want to comment. Councilwoman Gray has absolutely pointed out a really, really important issue right now. It used to be common knowledge that all markets are local in real estate, and that is just absolutely not true. With the internet sticking its nose into property transfers, we no longer have local markets, we have global markets. And everybody, I don't care where you live, if you're on this Zoom right now, you live in a community where you can look at foreign and out-of-state investors buying up your neighborhood. And they're not buying based on what had been the traditional historic prices of your community. Railroad tracks and streams don't separate property value anymore the way they used to. The globalization of real estate prices is going to be a major, major issue. And we have to figure out how to deal with it. And it's not something the city of Cleveland can do on our own. So I encourage you all to just think about that. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, we're at the point where we're going to move to audience questions. I'm going to ask Catherine Olnicki and Harriet to help me deliver some of the questions. Now, this is the panel doesn't have to, everyone on the panel doesn't have to answer the question. But if I see that there's some lagging, I will call on the panel, okay? So, Catherine, do you want to start with a question?
Certainly. The first question in the chat is, what is more important, building new houses, commercial space, or rehabbing / better utilizing our existing homes and storefronts? With the comment, affordable housing means below rate. Housing supply depends on taxpayer subsidy. Please comment.
Anyone on the panel want to take that? Go ahead.
I will, unless somebody wants to jump in first. So we have market development in parts of Cleveland, right? We have some functioning neighborhoods in Cleveland where private developers build stuff. We've got them all over Detroit Shoreway, Tremont, Ohio City downtown, and they're building that high-end stuff, and that some people consider it middle. I suppose it depends on your income bracket, right? But that stuff's being handled by the market, and that's a good thing. We don't want to poo-poo markets that are functioning. I'm glad to see cranes in the sky. I'm glad to see those buildings come online, and they are leased out before you can even drop, the promotional literature on the sidewalk outside. That's a very good thing. So the answer really becomes figuring out the affordable housing part, because that's where we're not seeing units come online fast enough. So we as a city have to focus our efforts on the affordable aspect of that. I'm working on an affordable project right now in my neighborhood. It's a long story, I won't get into it, but figuring out how to get more affordable units out into the market has got to be our priority, because the functioning part of the market is going to take care of the rest. And for commercial, I'm not a big fan of commercial space. I think, love it or hate it, we are an Amazon and Target society these days. We're going to have our stuff delivered, or we're going to go to the big box store. So I don't think we need as much commercial. I know we need modernized, updated commercial, but I think we can renovate commercial space as needed. I think we should focus our efforts on affordable housing.
Thank you. Anyone else want to address this question? If not, let's move on to the next one. Catherine?
What do you think are Cleveland's greatest assets to gain population growth to the city?
Yes.
Panel is okay?
Sorry.
I'm just looking to make sure my colleagues is okay. Our greatest asset, what we have to do is address, good jobs. If we bring good job in a safe neighborhood, providing a good opportunity for people to live and work in their neighborhood, that will help people want to grow the population. Nobody want to live in a neighborhood where they deal with safety issues or safety issue, or as well as addressing education. So between safety and education, making sure those two are on the upper scale, working together is something we have to do. We can't just pin out one thing to make growth, population grow in our neighborhoods, but we need to do it simultaneously. Education and good jobs at the same time, as well as addressing the safety issue, meaning making sure our neighborhoods are patrolled with police officers day in and day out. Whenever we call on our law enforcement, they have enough staff to be able to get out to the neighborhoods and see what's going on. And also making sure, like I said, good paying jobs that are at a livable wage so that people can move in our city and live in our city without having to always commute.
Great.
I-
Anyone else?
Yeah,
I
I'll
think-
jump in. Well, I'll just jump into this. So when you think about what are Cleveland's greatest assets to gain population growth, I think the people, we have some really phenomenal people and cultures, and I think that's a true asset to really like fulfilling that thing of live, work, educate, and play. It's a matter of how do we create those opportunities for more people, right? I always say, Cleveland has been very good to me. Unfortunately, though, there are a lot of Clevelanders who can't say the same thing, right? And until we can get more Clevelanders, to have a lived experience here where they are living, a good life, I think it's going to be hard to attract and grow to where we need to, because many of the people who are your spokespeople are not there. So I think we have to really find a way for us to really bet on Clevelanders and partner with Clevelanders in real ways so that they can benefit from all, a lot of this good stuff that's going on. Once we are able to do that, trust and believe you, Cleveland will grow. It will grow, but you gotta invest and protect your people that are already here. Councilman Harsh.
Yeah, I think that, the eds and meds is pretty well played out, but I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. We have a thriving healthcare industry that brings people from around the world, and it's an in-person industry. So it does require bodies at work. And of course, building on top of the success of our local universities. But I think there's also, as I talk about the globalization of our real estate markets, there's a fast growing global workforce where I was just talking to a woman who manages an apartment complex. I think she's on the call actually, downtown, where she said a lot of the people that are moving in there work in other cities. They just work from home, and Cleveland offers them a lower cost of living where they can get more bang for their buck, where they can be making that New York, Chicago salary, but living in Cleveland like kings. And so maybe we need to look at our ability to attract people that do work globally and just need a place to plug in, because we do have a beautiful city with great amenities, and that placemaking, I remember was a buzzword from about a decade ago. Those placemaking efforts are worthwhile. We should have walkable communities, and we should have places where you can go out at night and feel like you're in an urban area, like East 6th or whatever it is, 9th, I forget. But building that city that can attract people from around the world is also good. And I think that we have a really untapped aerospace industry. We've got NASA down the road, and between the math science emphasis at Case, NASA, I think we ought to do more to promote ourselves as an aerospace city industry. And if we could ever get Columbus to get out of the way and start building those windmills and those turbines out on the lake, coupling green energy with aerospace and those industries, I think is a path forward for us to grow as well.
Thank you. Next question, Catherine.
Either as an individual or a collective class, what is a new position or new vision, perspective, or approach that you want to bring to this session of City Council that may have not been present before? In other words, what would you want this class to become known for?
Good question. Who wants to tackle that?
I'll start. You listen, I'm all about like,
So y'all shut me up or I'll just talk. Go on.
yes, listen, I'm a person of like, I want our class to be known as a collective of people that are really going to work to get stuff done. I think it's a matter of getting our body to be more forward thinking, again, and again, yes, forward thinking, engaging with community, and solving problems. Councilman Harsh and I, we've had a couple of conversations, but we were talking about housing, right? And Councilman Harsh, was talking about, oh, we can just get prefab homes to get home. I'm like, well, that's dope. Let's do it. I feel like there is just so much synergy and energy with our council members. And I really, really want us to be known as a group of people working with our council president and colleagues to bring forth real solutions that can demonstratively show that we are really improving the quality of life of Clevelanders. There are far too many people who are suffering. And if we do not do that, then I would say collectively as a class, we have failed. That is our challenge.
And I will second that. I will second that, Councilwoman House. I just think that we have an opportunity to do something different. One thing that is a fact, leadership in Cleveland looks completely different for the first time in about 30 years or so. So therefore, now that we are here, we just got to roll up our sleeves and work together and understand everything should not be taken personal, and it's not going to always be your way or my way. But as long as we put the residents first, we will make a good decision at all times.
Yes, I third that as well, because the new council that came in been living in the neighborhoods to understand the lifestyle that they have seen around them. So that comes from the heart of your community to know what is needed, and not from people per se, in general, that's not living in your environment to see what you have seen. And by us coming in as the new vision of the council, and we understand what is needed to be changed, we are making some strides to change that. So as in the sense of, we kind of agreed when I heard Council Starr voice his opinion forcibly sometimes on the council floor, I have to commend him for being so passionate, as well as Councilwoman House, as well as Harsh, and all the other council members, that we are basically working together and feeling the passion of how we need to stand together and voice our opinion to make this drive and change, to see the change in our community. So when we out there on that floor and we want to pass ordinance, we need to understand, what is this ordinance going to do directly for the citizen in our community. They want to see tangible changes. They want to see something happening. They don't want to hear nothing happening. They've been hearing that for a long time. That's why we in the situation we're in. So when we want to pass something, let's pass something tangible so people can see that it's actually happening. And it happened through the new vision of the new councils that's coming in to collectively work with the other councils who probably been wanting this change for a long time. So now we're supporting each other. We got the wealth of the oldest council vision. We got the wealth of the middle council vision, and we got the wealth of the new councils coming in vision. And when we collaborate, bring that together, that makes a difference of how we need to invest in our communities better. So that's my take. Thank you.
I want to jump on this real quick, because I think that the most important thing for this body to change in terms of just historical trends is our mindset. We need to be a growth city. We need to have a mindset of growth. We need to be a city on the rise. Cities are doing one of two things everywhere in the world. They're growing or they're dying. You only have two options. There is no status quo. You can't stay the same. No city maintains the same population level forever. You're either growing or you're dying. And we've been dying for decades for reasons that aren't entirely, our forebears' faults. There's global trends, there's deindustrialization, there's all kinds of things that happen, but we've been dying. We have to grow, and we have to have a growth mindset as a body and as a city. Cleveland was always nationally been famous for not being a pretentious place. We've always been very down to earth, very humble, but very raw and honest people. And I think that the downside of not being pretentious is sometimes we can embrace our own negative self-reflection. If Cleveland ranks #1 on anything, it's in promoting our failings. We love to talk about how we're the worst at this, the worst at that, the worst at anything. We love talking about that, and it drives me crazy because who wants to move to a city that's constantly telling everybody that we're the worst place in the world to live? Like, that's just not even true to begin with. I can think of 100 places in Ohio that are worse to live than Cleveland. And believe me, I've been all over this country, and I've been all over the state. I've been in Cincinnati, I've been in Columbus, I've been in Detroit, I've been in Pittsburgh, I've been to LA, San Francisco, Houston, New Orleans, I've been to Philadelphia, Boston, Baltimore. I've been all over this country. There are shitty ass cities all over this country. Cleveland is a nice place to live. It's a clean place to live. The entire north side of Philadelphia calls itself Filth-adelphia because it is by far the most disgusting place I've ever walked, because they don't even try to clean up their trash, right? Cleveland has a lot of things going for it. We're a clean city. We're a nice city. We've got good air. We've got clean water, and we've got opportunity here. We need to start talking about ourselves in positive light to promote this city as a place where people want to live. And if there's anything we could do, if we could switch from the death mentality to the growth mentality, then I will die a happy person. Because if Cleveland can actually start to grow and reverse this decades-long trend, then we will all benefit, and our children will benefit, and our grandchildren will benefit. So getting into the growth mentality, to me, is the most important thing that we could possibly do.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this question. We're emerging from a pandemic, and I'd like to hear from each of you, how did your ward fare, and what lessons do you draw from the experience?
It's all right. We're going to be okay.
Okay, thank you. Let me chat in. That is a big question, because people that dealt with this COVID situation dealt with it in all different ways. And I can't even answer that question, how everyone fared on it, because I did not engage with everyone that dealt with it, because we were all locked down for almost the first, year and a half, per se. But I know that it devastated each and every one out there, because, the jobs was held up, their lifestyles was held up, everything changed mentally. It was a lot of mental breakdown amongst the people in the ward. People attitudes changed, their lifestyle changed, our safety environment changed, our food environment changed, because of the food bank had to come out and literally feed everyone who who needed help. So our financially situation changed, but to see everything around you brought devastation, and brought devastation and happiness and despair. That was something to see mentally. So when you came out of COVID, and we still somewhat in COVID, we still, for me, we still managing it, because you got to get out here and readjust in the world again to see how well that you can survive. So for me, that's a big question to answer, in the sense of how did your community survive from it. I think Ward 4 is still coming out of it, because due to the couple of meetings that I had in my community, they are coming out. They're ready to live. They're ready to find out, how they can start all over again. They're looking for help. They're looking for answers. So what I see for right now and stuff, we just have to move forward in this COVID environment, and just help each other, and make sure that we are going to be living in a sustainable lifestyle and be happy again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Doc, I would just express Some of the concerns that we had in Ward 5 was the fact that people who had jobs, some of them were laid off and they lost their jobs. So some people who was working part-time jobs in Ward 5 ultimately lost their job. And when I mentioned by that, the median income of Ward 5 was $15,000 that I said earlier. So imagine making or working part-time and then you lose that job just because the service is not over. So what I did was get out and collab with the food bank, similar to some of my other colleagues, and we distribute in Ward 5, 42,000 pounds of food to residents on a weekly basis, continuously making sure we help support those residents. But then I also had to face the reality that some parts of Ward 5 residents were moving as if it not understanding the severity of the COVID pandemic, meaning some youth were just at home like, hey, I don't have to go to school. Also, we learned about the broadband lack of connectivity that we had in our city of Cleveland, where there are actually dead spots where people could not connect. So when our schools were going into this program to go online stream and do virtual schooling, a lot of our youth received some of the internet, but then we found out that it was hard for them to connect due to the fact of shortage. So the school district improved that by making sure that they got hotspots out. Also, social service organizations such as the Boys and Girls Club Friendly In, neighborhoods, they started to turn their facilities as into a hub for people to be able to come and get help for their schoolwork, such as students. So I take COVID as an opportunity for us to learn where we were struggling at so we can enhance that. Just in case we ever have to go through another pandemic, we know how to handle those situations and address them quickly, and also have a best practices for those.
Thank you. Anyone else on this question before we move on?
Yeah, so that's, and thinking about that, I would say, we had, unfortunately, way too many people, in Ward 7 who had already been living in a pandemic before this global pandemic happened, right? People who were struggling, lost jobs, not connected to resources. So it wasn't necessarily a big shift when you were already living in crisis, which is always that's a hard pill to swallow, right? From there, as Councilman Starr talked about it, and I think this is something that our community is going to have to adjust with and deal with the realities of how many of our young people, those who we can't find, because I mean, literally there were like thousands of children in CMSD who never logged on, right? But then for those who are engaged, our children are so far behind. We have to drastically change our school system, period. Like this, and the thing that is alarming to me is that, as we're like, oh, it's a little relief with with COVID-19, people are just going back to what that we knew didn't work prior to. So, I mean, those are some things that I'm grappling with. And then childcare, the amount of, women who have completely had to leave the workforce just due to not having real childcare options. I mean, again, it's something that we are grappling with, and that, many, women and families within Ward 7 have been experiencing. And I don't think we as a community have come up with some good strategies on how, we can support them in that endeavor. So.
Thank you. All right.
Would that segue into the question about CMSD at all?
I'm sorry, but
Would the councilwoman's comment about the I almost called it the plague, the pandemic and how it affected schools segue into the question over in the comments about CMSD in general? Because I would love to take that segue.
go with it.
So we spent a long time in this city trying to get kids to go to school. The whole public school system put a whole bunch of eggs in the basket to get to school, get to class. And we really focused on getting kids into class. We focused on getting kids into class earlier with pre-K. and we focused on getting kids into class more days out of the week to increase graduation rates, and we were doing it. As a matter of fact, CMSD has this untold story that hasn't really been celebrated much, but they basically closed the achievement gap in Cleveland, which ought to be like front page headlines. Like, this ought to be stop the presses. Holy crap, are you kidding me? Because it's true. Black, brown, and white kids are graduating at the same rates right now in CMSD, and that is a fantastic success story. But it was accomplished by getting kids into class and getting them into more class and longer hours. And the pandemic just turned all that off. We just told kids overnight, never mind, just stay home, right? Forget about it. Don't come to school. And we know why we did it. We had to do it. But recovering from that is going to be a monumental task. So CMSD suffers from this problem of concentrated poverty, more so than the city itself, because if you aren't poor in the city of Cleveland, you've always had alternatives. You can always send your kids to Catholic school. You can always send your kids to private school if you got the money and you live in the city, and we have a whole infrastructure that's always existed for that. But CMSD was left with the people that couldn't afford to do that, didn't have that option, and weren't able to follow the old advice of run to the border and get out of CMSD in time by the time you have kids. So CMSD, more than any other institution in Cleveland, deals with concentrated poverty on a daily basis. And the worst thing you can do for a child is put them in a classroom full of other kids who are all struggling with concentrated poverty. It is the absolute worst way to get a good outcome. We know through lots of, I worked for the American Federation of Teachers for a year. I should preface this. I spent an entire year working with charter school teachers and talking with teachers and studying and researching public education. The worst thing you can do is put a whole bunch of kids that are all coming from very low educational attainment backgrounds, very low income backgrounds, and put them in a room together and expect them to have great outcomes because of one teacher. What you have to do is integrate your classrooms. You need to have classrooms with kids that are coming from middle class, upper class, and low income families, and put them in a room together where they can actually benefit from different types of backgrounds and different types of experience, and then put them in classes that are going to be able to recognize their needs. And CMSD is trying that. So the entire district is open enrollment. You can send your kid to any school in the district. It doesn't have to be the one down the block. It can be, but you can send your kid to any school. And CMSD is trying really hard to create pockets of excellence within the school district that will allow parents that have higher educational expectations to feel like their kids have a path forward. If middle class parents that grew up in suburban environments where 90% of kids go to college live in the city of Cleveland and they don't see those kids going to college, they're not going to put their kids in public schools. They're not going to put their kids in public school to go to a school where they don't think their kids are going to make it into a college because none of the other kids are. So breaking that mold, it's a chicken and egg problem. Richie, I always get his name wrong. Somebody correct me. Pepperinen?
Yeah, you got it. That's how.
Pepperinen? He had the most brilliantly worded sentence I've ever read in The Fifth Migration, where he talks about the problem of public education. He talks about it as a chicken and egg problem. You got to have high expectation parents in low expectation schools. The low expectation schools won't attract them unless it's a flywheel problem, and we've got to break that mold. CMSD is trying really hard. There are some high performing schools in CMSD, and we need to build off that success and make sure that people know about them. Say Yes to Education is fantastic. Giving people free college when they go to a 4-year is a really, really great way to attract people to stay in CMSD. Having things like BARD Early College and the International Baccalaureate programs, and then just the John Hay, the success over at John Hay and their 3 schools are really important. We have to be a city that can retain families when they have kids and they don't run for private schools or Catholic schools or suburban schools. And if we can't figure that out, we will not grow. It's why I brought it up in the beginning of this conversation as one of my top 3 priorities. We have to work with CMSD. We have to promote them, support them, and continue to see those kids succeed, because otherwise we're not going to keep the population we need for us to grow.
Councilperson Starr, I see your hand up.
I would just say, do we have 2 hours? Because my colleagues will tell you that I can go on and on about CMSD, being as I am a graduate from CMSD back in 2007. So one thing that I would just talk about, some research that I've done from my last meeting that I've met with CEO Eric Gordon, is talking about the fact that we have an 81% graduation rate, but when I did some research, almost 50% of those graduates are in special education with IEPs, with its individualized educational program. So to me, that right there is alarming when you see almost more than half of your graduates are just special education, which I don't know if kids are just getting put into these classes or being categorized this way. But when you do that, you face yourself with that danger once these kids graduate. Meaning, if you just putting kids in IEP and they just being classified in this category, once they graduate and they go into the real world, they're not prepared. I've been mentoring youth for about 14, 15 years now, and I've been to graduations where I've attended with a kid and I know for a fact that they can't do the basic math, reading, writing. So when Councilwoman House mentioned we have to take a broader approach and look at it realistically to figure out how we're going to redo education or how education should be done, it starts obviously at home, but we got to also look at the rules and regulations that are being issued from the state and down in Columbus, as well as looking at how the checks and balances. You know, to me as a individual, when I look at the way the CMSD education is set up, when I see that the CEO is reporting to our mayors, that's just nothing but a sign of failure. So when I hear that 81% graduation rate, I start to get alarmed because I face reality that some kids may have been put in classified into this IEP or special education, and then they graduate and don't have no skills or no services. So the way we are educating and the way we are taking away after school programming and not providing good programming or closing the gap where our kids just been at home for 2 years and it is classified as that, Councilman Harsh. That's what they classify it as. But also when you take away the fact that kids are in a neighborhood, they're going through poverty, going through different issues, we have to be proactive in ways that we handle education, as well as providing resources and services to better help our youth. We cannot just sit back and say, we're going to continue to pass them along. But we knew that during their third grade, their test scores for the core literacy were off track when 76% of them still passed on to the next grade. So therefore, there's something that is being done wrong, fundamentally wrong for our youth that is being presented as far as the education. And then looking into how we are doing things as far as the education and what the administration is doing, as well as how we can really, really provide the right services and needs as it relates to education. But like I said, I can go on about different research studies that I found, the amount of funding that goes into public education, such as CMSD. But you look at the results. You know, our kids graduate, but what are they graduating with? What life skills are they prepared for, such as the core literacy rate that they need to have in order for them to be successful in a good job?
Thanks. Catherine, why don't we go back to the question about the Age-Friendly Cities program?
Certainly. All right. So about 10 years ago, Cleveland joined the World Health Organization's Age-Friendly Cities program. What initiatives do you have in mind to make your ward more friendly to persons of all ages, in particular to make it more pedestrian friendly? Too many sidewalks need repairing. Laws to enforce snow removal from sidewalks need to be enforced, if not strengthened, is what that.
Who wants to try that?
I will just talk about, I think, just a different approach. I would say from this city's perspective and then from a community perspective. I am still one of those people that are saying we in the city of Cleveland have too much stuff. Right. We have too many streets. We have too much infrastructure, and we cannot effectively, and I would say appropriately, maintain it. So we really need to begin to have some conversations of what does a redesign of our city look like based on our resources and being able to accommodate it and having the accessibility needed for whoever and wherever. When it comes to residents themselves and looking at creating environments and having communities where people really can live, from birth to their golden years until they transition, we have to have just more very open conversations about what you actually need, how your physical abilities change, and what are some new strategies for people to live. A lot of people, and I would say a lot of our community members are living alone in homes that were not designed based on the changing needs of their physical abilities, right? And not being connected to resources and able to functionally redesign your home. We just have to talk about it. I mean, and I think there are all like some real great opportunities that we have in front of us of communal living. When you are in a 2,500 square feet home as a single person, that's a lot, to maintain. And because of our economic resources, many of us are just not in a position to go at it alone, even though we have this mentality, or we have been conditioned to believe that I want my own space. In the way that we have been doing it. So I think there are some opportunities for us to, from the city of Cleveland, to really invest specifically in a different model, a focus on people coming together, combining resources, and having an alternating what space looks like, but then also, do we have a plan of when people actually die? And I think that's another part of this. It's not just about making the alterations in the here and now, but planning for when our elders, when they pass on, what is going to happen to their space? Because one of the things that we just don't have resources that we can afford to just throw away. And I just think we have to just have some more really open conversations of what it looks to live and also die, and what's going to happen when you pass away. So,
Any other takers before we move on to the next question?
I mean, the aging in place thing is like, I think, pretty well developed at this point. There's organizations dedicated to helping people age at home, and that's all. There's a lot of work being put into that field.
Okay, Catherine, you're up. It's next.
What are the strengths and weaknesses of the current market-oriented community development strategy in addressing the city's housing problem? What would an equity planning solution look like?
I have to run. I would love to spend 20 minutes answering that. I think I kind of touched on it. I got to go, but thank you for putting this forum on, and I appreciate all the time. The market handles the high end stuff. The government has to handle the rest. I mean, it's just, we're not going to get rich people to build stuff for poor people. I'm sorry. I've lost faith in the market's ability to make money off middle class. They're not interested in that. When they can make money off rich people, they're going to build for rich people. So government has to prioritize affordable housing and middle income housing. That has to be we have to fill that void. Us and all of our great nonprofit partners. So thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Why don't we get some reaction to this question, and we'll make it our last question, and we'll throw it back to Mr. Bromley to close it out. Is that okay?
Can you repeat that last question, please?
Certainly. What are the strengths and weaknesses of the current market-oriented community development strategy in addressing the city's housing problem? What would an equity planning solution look like?
Oh yeah, well, Councilman Karsh kind of talked about that. I think we as a city have to be committed specifically to affordable housing. And when we say affordable housing, I'm one of those people like, no, what's the numbers? What are you talking about affordable? I really believe that the city of Cleveland needs to make some real investments in having homes that are, between $45,000 to about $85,000. And people were saying, oh, no, you can't do that. I'm like, yes, you can. I mean, there are like some new 3D imaging things where people are like building homes in 2 days. Those types of things can really bring significant change in our housing stock and getting us to the level of ensuring that Clevelanders have a real opportunity to have quality and affordable housing based on the income they are currently making. And I think without having plans and strategies to invest in housing markets, specifically for $45,000 to $85,000 homes, then we're going to be continually to beg and ask and plead, with developers who have just shown they are not interested. And I would say in partnership with this, we must have a connection to our financial lending institutions that will lend our people the money to not only have access to this new housing stock we need, but also have the resources needed so that they can rehabilitate what they have. Like, our financial institutions have been horrendous and despicable when it comes to what they are not doing. And it's one thing to say, okay, we can't do it, but they have not even tried to even work in true partnership with our people to give them access to resources. We know it, we got all the studies, we have the generations of data that shows they're not going to do it. And we got to stop it, right? And the city of Cleveland, that's one of the things too, where I feel like where we have fallen short as a city, as a county, as a state, and as a federal government, of not holding people more accountable for the disinvestment that have happened in our communities. And so I'm looking forward, and I know this council, I'm putting it on our shoulders. We're gonna have to change some of that, because again, people are tired. They're tired of living in some of these conditions, and they deserve to be able to live a great life in Cleveland too. They deserve that. And I am confident that over these next 4 years, we will be able to bring together, like I said, some of these ideas and solutions that we're talking to fruition, and even just trying to have some more demonstration of how it's a reality. You might not be able to do the whole a city, right? But if we can begin to start taking certain census tracts to show demonstration, maybe a little neighborhood, a street, a block, we just have to be able to invest to show that it's possible. That's one of the things that I'm looking forward to in this, over these next 4 years.
Fabulous. I feel the passion. Good passion. I want to thank the panel, the council members, for giving us their time and in general their services community. Councilperson Deborah Gray, Councilperson Richard Starr, Councilperson Stephanie House, and Councilperson Chris Harsh. Thank you so much for your time and energy and the answers to the question. I'm going to ask Charles Bromley to take us out.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for leading us through this, Dean. And this I think was maybe my idea of having young council people with a fierce feeling of now and wanting to do things. It has been a long time, 16 years of one administration. A lot of people have been on council for a long time. And I think sometimes you just get dragged down and you just begin to lose your passion for what you can do. There's one thing that came through to me clearly, is there's some passion among the new council people to do things differently, to make a difference, to make a change in this community. It's tough. There's no question about it. We've been working out at Shaker Square with a lot of the LLCs, and there's many, many difficult challenges there. But I appreciate it very much. We'll have more forums coming up. Look forward to all your participation. This has been a great opportunity, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you so much.